Right now, a buyer in your market is quietly building a shortlist of who to consider for a problem that you could solve. They're building a short mental list, three names, maybe four. And here's the part that should stop you cold. If your name isn't already on their mind, you're not being rejected, you're being eliminated silently before a single conversation ever happens, before you even know there was anything to compete for. We tend to imagine losing business as a moment, a clear no, a deal that slipped away after a fair fight. But in most markets, that's not how loss actually occurs. The real loss happens earlier, in silence, in a decision that you were never part of. This is silent elimination. It's the signature idea behind everything that I teach. It's one of the three forces in what I call the silent race, the competition for a buyer's trust that runs entirely before contact. And this is how you lose it. Once you understand it, you stop blaming your sales pitch and start fixing the real problem. In this video, I'm going to show you how exactly silent elimination works, why it's happening to you more than you think, and what it actually takes to stop being eliminated before you ever get to compete. If you run a business, if you're a founder, or if you sell professional services, this is for you because your buyers build that shortlist in private, and you're the one most likely to be cut without ever being heard. My name's Rod Agatep, and I spent over 27 years in B2B marketing watching exactly this happen. It's a single pattern that explains more lost business than any pitch or price ever could. So let's begin by defining exactly what silent elimination is, because once you understand the definition, you'll start to see it everywhere. Let me define silent elimination because understanding it matters. Silent elimination occurs when a buyer removes you from consideration before any direct contact. Not after a meeting, not after a proposal, but before all of this. You're filtered during the buyer's private process, deciding who's even worth talking to. You get no signal that it happened, no rejection, no feedback, nothing. Just silence. The elimination happens in a room that you were never invited to. The word silent is doing a lot of work here. In normal competitive loss, you get some information. You pitched, you lost, maybe you even got a reason. With silent elimination, there's no event to point to. The buyer simply never reached out. You have no way of knowing that you were considered or cut, or that even an opportunity existed at all. And the word elimination, that matters too. This is not the buyer deciding that you were bad. It's the buyer deciding, often without much conscious thought, that you're not one of the few names worth their attention. You're not being eliminated for being wrong. You're being eliminated for not being top of mind, for not being familiar, for not being present when the list got made. It's rarely personal. It's structural. And here's the uncomfortable reframe. Most businesses think that the competition starts when the sales conversation does. The pitch, the proposal, and the negotiation. Silent elimination says the most important competition happens before that. It happens in the buyer's head when they decide who makes the shortlist. By the time you're in the conversation, you have already survived the elimination round. The trouble is, most businesses never realized that there was an elimination round at all. So they keep losing without even knowing. If you're not deliberately winning that filtering, you're losing by default over and over without ever seeing it happen. So if the elimination happens in the buyer's mind, the next obvious question becomes, how does a shortlist actually get built? To understand silent elimination, you have to understand how buyers actually build a shortlist, because that's where the elimination happens. And the truth is, buyers don't build shortlists in a rational way that we imagine. They do not survey the entire market, weigh every option, and then rank them objectively. They can't. There's just too much choice and too little time, so they take a shortcut, and that shortcut is memory. When a buyer needs something, the first thing they do is reach into their own memory and pull out the names that were already there. Who do I know? Who have I heard of? And who comes to mind for this? That mental pull forms the initial list almost instantly, without ever thinking. The names that surface get considered. Everyone else stays invisible. Think about how you choose a specialist for an important need. You wouldn't research every provider in the city. You would think about one or two names that you already recognize. Maybe ask a trusted person and build your list from there. The provider you already have in your mind made the list. The 50 equally qualified providers that you never heard of never stood a chance. That is silent elimination from the buyer side, and you're doing it all the time without even noticing. This is why being in the buyer's memory before they need you is everything. The shortlist is built from memory, which means the real competition is a competition for memory, fought long before that buying moment. If your name is not already lodged in there, tied to the problem the buyer is trying to solve, you simply won't surface when they look within. And if you don't surface, you're eliminated silently, instantly, before anything happens. And notice what this means. The shortlist often forms before the buyer does any real research. The research phase often just confirms and refines the list that the memory has already created. So if you're not in the memory in the start, you're usually not in the research phase, which means you're not on the shortlist, which means you are already gone. The whole thing cascades from that first instant of memory. Now that we understand how buyers build their shortlist, let's look at the consequence. Why the best business in the market often loses. Here's the part that frustrates most talented people, and it follows directly from how shortlists are formed. The best option in your market often loses, not because it was judged, because it was never judged at all. It was silently eliminated before the evaluation, while a weaker but more familiar option made the list and won. Sit with how unfair that feels, and then accept how true it is. A genuinely better business, more skilled, more experienced, more capable, gets eliminated because it was not in the buyer's memory. Meanwhile, a weaker competitor who happened to be more visible and more familiar surfaces from the buyer's mind and makes that shortlist and wins the work. Quality lost to familiarity, and quality never even knew that there was a contest. This is a familiarity advantage in action. Known consistently beats better and unknown every single time. Why does this happen? Because buyers can't judge the quality that they never see. Your superior work is invisible to a buyer who does not know that you exist. They can only choose among the options that surfaced, and they'll pick the best of those, even if all of them are worse than the option that got silently eliminated. The buyer is not being foolish. They're sensibly choosing from a list built irrationally from memory. I've watched this play out time and time again. A business with decades of experience loses a job to a competitor with half the capability, and they conclude that the market doesn't value quality or that they need to cut their prices. And both conclusions are wrong. The market never got to value their quality because they were eliminated before quality was ever on the table. The problem was never their quality, it was their absence from memory. This is the great trap of the talented, believing that being good enough will eventually be recognized and rewarded. Unfortunately, it's not. Silent elimination guarantees that being good is irrelevant if you're not also present. The work doesn't speak for itself because it never gets the chance to speak at all. Excellence with no visibility is not humble. In a market, it's simply eliminated. Now, let's look at how silent elimination compares to another concept you may have already learned, because while they're closely related, they're not the same. You may have come across the idea of invisible loss from one of my previous videos. You might be wondering how silent elimination is different since they sound related. They are related, and the distinction is worth getting right because it tells you something about the stages of being unseen. Invisible loss is total failure. The buyer's entire journey, need, research, shortlist, and decision happens without you ever being in the picture at all. You were never visible, never considered, never even briefly on the radar. The opportunity ran its full course in a world that did not include you. Invisible loss is the buyer's entire journey happening without you ever being in the picture. Silent elimination is one notch later in the process. Here, you are at least briefly in the picture, you surfaced as a possibility, you were a candidate for a moment, and then you got cut before any real conversation. You made it onto the radar and then off again without ever knowing that you were on it. So invisible loss is never being seen at all. Silent elimination is being seen for a moment and then being eliminated. Why does this distinction matter to you? Because they point to the same cure, just at slightly different intensities. Both come from a shortage of visibility, familiarity, and memory. Invisible loss means you have almost no presence in your market. Silent elimination means you have some presence, enough to occasionally surface, but not enough to survive the cut. Not enough familiarity and trust to stay on the list once you appear. Either way, the lesson lands in the same place. Whether you're never seen or seen and then cut, the fix is to build enough visibility, enough familiarity, and enough trust. So not only do you surface in the buyer's mind, but you stay there through the filtering. You want to not just be a name that appears, you want to be a name that survives. That requires being present and trusted long before the buyer even starts to decide. And once you understand that, the next question becomes obvious. If silent eliminations happens before contact, why do businesses almost never realize it's happening? One of the most dangerous things about silent elimination is precisely that it's silent. You get no signal, and because you get no signal, you draw all the wrong conclusions about why business is not coming in. Let me walk you through what silence is doing to your thinking, because this is where businesses go wrong for years. When you're silently eliminated, there's no rejection to look at, no lost deal report, no feedback, and from your side, it feels like nothing happened. So your mind fills the silence with explanations that feel believable, but you're wrong. You decide that the market's slow. You decide maybe it's the season, or the economy, or that buyers are tightening budget. You decide maybe your prices are too high, and every one of these explanations points you away from the real problem. Meanwhile, the real problem is that you're being eliminated before the conversation because you're not present and familiar enough. That goes completely unaddressed because you can't see it. You can't fix a problem you don't know you have, so you fix the wrong things. You polish your pitch for conversations that never get scheduled. You lower your prices to win deals that you were never even considered for. You work harder at the parts that you could see, while the real leak stays hidden. This is why naming silent elimination matters so much. The moment you understand that the silence may not mean low demand, but elimination before contact, you start looking in the right place. You stop asking, why am I losing deals? And start asking the better question. Am I even making the shortlist? If not, why not? That single shift in questioning is the beginning of fixing the problem. So whenever your market feels mysteriously quiet or you sense more should be happening than is reaching you, treat that silence as a clue, not a verdict. It may not be telling you that buyers don't want what you offer. It may be telling you that buyers are eliminating you before you ever get to make the offer. Now that you understand why this happens, let's look at how to stop it. So how do you stop being silently eliminated? The answer follows directly from how elimination works. Since you're cut for not being in the buyer's memory when the shortlist forms, the cure is to be in their memory on purpose long before the moment. You win the elimination route not during it, but the weeks and months before it ever begins. The first principle of the cure is being present before you need it. You can't wait until a buyer is shopping to become memorable, because by then, the shortlist is already forming from their existing memory. You have to be present in your market all the time, so your name is already there when the need arises. This means showing up consistently with genuine value long before a given buyer is ready to buy. Present is something you need to build in advance, like savings, not something you would draw from on demand. The second principle is association. It's not enough to be vaguely known. You have to be known for a specific problem the buyer is trying to solve. So when that problem arises, your name is what comes to mind. This is about lodging yourself in the memory and tied to a clear trigger. When the buyer thinks of a problem, you want them to think of you automatically. That association is built consistently by being visible around that exact problem. The third principle is familiarity and trust. Enough of it to survive the cut, not just the surface. Remember the distinction from earlier. Surfacing in memory gets you onto the radar, but familiarity and trust are what keeps you on the list once you appear. This is built through repeated, valuable contact over weeks or even months. The kind of consistent presence that turns vaguely recognized name into a trusted, obvious candidate. You want not just to be remembered, but remembered fondly and trusted. That is what winning the silent race actually looks like. Conversation ownership. Becoming the source your buyers already learned from before they ever build the list. Put those three together: presence before need, association with the problem, and enough familiarity and trust to survive, and you flip silent elimination on its head. Instead of being the name that never surfaces or gets cut, you became the name that surfaces first and stays. You win the elimination round before the buyer even consciously runs it, because you did all the work to be top of mind long before they started deciding. You become the name that surfaces first and stays. And notice the timeline that this demands. All of this happens before the buying moment. The competition for the shortlist is won in advance through steady presence, but not in the moment through a clever pitch. This is why marketing can't be something that you switch on only when you need sales. By then, the silent elimination has already happened. It has to be a steady presence that keeps you top of mind at all times. You have to be ready for when a buyer is ready to purchase. Now, let's look at what this changes about the way you market every day. Let me make this concrete, because the principles only matter if you change what you actually do. The biggest implication of silent elimination is that it changes when marketing has to happen. Most businesses ramp up their marketing when they need sales, and they go quiet when they're busy. Silent elimination makes that pattern fatal because a shortlist forms from memory built during the quiet times, not during your burst of activity. So the first change is to make your presence continuous. You need to be constantly visible in your market, whether or not you currently need business, because buyers are forming shortlists all the time on their timeline, not yours. The business that's always present is always in the running. The businesses that only show up when work is needed is, by definition, absent during most of the moments when shortlists are being built and gets eliminated from most of them. The second change is to focus your visibility on being memorable for a specific problem rather than just being present. Scattered visibility does not lodge you into their memory because it gives the buyer nothing specific to tie you to. You want to be the name for a particular problem. So when that problem shows up in a buyer's mind, you show up with it. Depth and consistency around a single clear association beats shallow presence across many. The third change is to value the slow compounding work of building familiarity and trust, even though it produces no immediate visible response. Most of the trust that wins shortlist battles is built quietly, with buyers you can't see over long periods of time. It won't show up as an instant lead, it'll show up later, as buyers who arrive already knowing and trusting you. You have quietly worked your way onto their list. You have to be willing to do the work whose payoff stays invisible until the moment it suddenly matters. Make those three changes: continuous presence, specific association, and patient trust building, and you stop being a victim of silent elimination and start using it to your advantage. Because here's the flip side. Silent elimination is eliminating your competitors too. Every buyer shortlist you make is one of your unseen competitors not making it. The same force that's been quietly costing you business can start quietly winning it for you once you're the one who's present, associated, and trusted. Let's bring everything together because the entire idea can be summarized into one simple chain. Here's everything pulled together. Silent elimination is when a buyer cuts you from consideration before any conversation happens, silently, without signal, because you're not in their memory when the shortlist is formed. Shortlists are built from memory, not objective evaluation, which is why the best option often loses to the more familiar one. Excellence without visibility will still get you eliminated. Silent elimination is one stage later than invisible loss. Briefly seen and cut rather than never seen at all, because the cure is the same. Build presence before their need, association with a specific problem, and enough familiarity and trust to survive the cut. And because the silence gives you no feedback, you have to recognize it yourself. You need to stop blaming a slow market for what is really elimination before contact. You win the elimination round in advance through steady presence rather than a clever pitch. Now you could flip the whole thing around. The force that has been quietly eliminating you starts eliminating your competitors instead, while you become the name that surfaces first. This is one piece of a bigger system I call the conversion ecosystem, and every other video on this channel builds on it. And there's more in the description if you want to go deeper. The most visible, the most valuable, the most trusted business in your market wins. If this video gave you a new way to think about your business, the next video in the conversion ecosystem builds on this foundation and shows you how the next piece fits into the bigger picture. Go watch that one next. I'll see you there.